Hello, I'm Gary Stearman of Prophecy Watchers, and we have a very special guest in studio today. You're going to be interested in hearing what he has to say. And of course, our co-host and good friend Mondo Gonzalez is at the other end of the table. Mondo, it's good to have you here.
It's good to be here, Gary.
Between us, we have, let's put it this way, a lot of information packed into the persona of Avi Lipkin. And it's always a good thing to have you here from Israel because Christians are very interested in what's happening in Israel.
Okay, well, I wanted to say two things. Firstly, as someone who trained and served as an Israeli army spokesman, the first thing we learned in the course was that in the Middle East, you learn to expect the unexpected. And if I can enlarge on that, I would just say, for example, that I studied Russian language and Sovietology for 5 years at New York University and Hebrew University. I did not have a clue when the Berlin Wall fell. I did not know that Gorbachev was going to break up the Soviet Union into pieces, including Russia and then all the other states that broke away. And there's so many people I know who were Sovietologists, none of them caught it. Similar in Israel and in the Middle East, things happen that nobody predicted and everything goes haywire. And I would say the key word here would be the Arab Spring. Everybody thought the Arab Spring would bring democracy, freedom, and there is no country where there was democracy or freedom. Just a lot of people died, and the same corruption. There is no democracy in Islam. So the Muslims themselves say it, that there cannot be democracy in Islam. And so in that reality, that's the reality in which we live in Israel. Regarding the new government, at the time of this program, the new government has been in somewhere between a month and 2 months. And people are wondering, well, what happened to Netanyahu? Why is he not the prime minister anymore? And I would like to say, firstly, that I love Netanyahu. I think he was the best prime minister we ever had, the longest-serving prime minister we ever had. But just as in the case of any antibiotic or any medicine that a sick person has to take, when you pass the expiration date, you got to throw it out. In America, it's called term limits. And I am a total supporter, especially with my Judeo-Christian Bible Bloc party, of term limits in the Israeli political system. Netanyahu was there for 11 years as prime minister, and time to go home.
Let me interrupt you just for a moment and hold up this book, Israel's Bible Bloc. And what is Israel's Bible Bloc? And by the way, you're telling me that you're going to rewrite this book, which has been around a few years now, but I'd just like to tell you that Avi has been really involved in Israeli politics.
Yes, indeed. I have been living in Israel for the last 53 years, but during the last 31 years, I've been coming back to the States to preach in Christian churches of all denominations, Messianic groups also, and to teach them about Israel, teach them about the Middle East. And I would say about 22 years ago, I became convinced that the Christians and Messianics living in Israel, who until today have no seat in our parliament, in our Knesset, need to have representation. And there is no other party. We have 38 political parties in the Israeli political system. Our party's intention is that half of our candidates will be rabbinic Jews and half of our candidates will be Christians and Messianics. And also to prepare for the millions and millions of Jews and Christians who will be moving to Israel henceforth. I'm predicting this will have a direct impact on our party and on the Israeli political system, because today we're about 7 million Jews and 500,000 Christian believers, and there is no representation for them in the Knesset. Tomorrow it won't be 7 million and a half, it'll be 17 million and a half. And I predict here, this is Prophecy Watchers, I'm predicting that our party will be the biggest party in the Knesset after this major wave of Jews and Christian spouses fleeing to Israel.
All right.
Can you share a little bit about the Netanyahu's very well liked?
Yes.
And what really caused the shift between Netanyahu now to Naftali Bennett?
Well, in politics, very often, when a person is too successful, that person does not like to bring in upstarts. you know, there is this rumor, which I disagree with, that Jews are very special and very smart. I always say Jews are very smart as individuals, but as a collective, we make a lot of stupid mistakes. As a collective, I don't want to say. Anyway, so we have a problem that for Netanyahu to survive literally decades, don't forget, he was prime minister from 96 to 99 also. He was a foreign minister. He was a finance minister. Netanyahu actually saved the Israeli economy after the previous one, I won't mention his name, virtually destroyed the Israeli economy in 2000. So Netanyahu has a very good track record, very good service to the country. And then he became, again, prime minister, and he lasted for 11 years. But for him to rule the party single-handedly, he has to virtually wipe out any possible threat to his hegemony on the party. And so what happened was people like Avigdor Lieberman, Moshe Kachlon, Gidon Saar, Naftali Bennett, these were all Likud people. And they had run-ins with him, because in politics, you're going to have run-ins, you're going to have disagreements. And so what I see, I hate to use the word toxicity, but after 11 years as prime minister, Netanyahu made too many enemies within the party. And a lot of people in the Israeli public saw it and knew about it, and they said, you know what, let the younger generation come in. Why don't you, Netanyahu, why don't you prepare a new leadership, a younger leadership? How long can you continue? And then all of a sudden, you leave the party with nothing. Even Moses prepared Joshua as his successor.
I have a quick question. This younger generation you're talking about, what do they believe in general? What are their expectations?
Well, firstly, I have to tell you that the younger generation, the names I just mentioned, and the Naftali Bennett group,
yes,
they're about 10, 20 years younger. The ideology is Likud. It's nationalist. I was always a Likud member until I formed my own political party. See, even here, I'm a minor example of a Likud member who finally saw that I had no future in the Likud, but I also believed in representation for the Christians. The second thing I wanted to say is that Israel was founded as a socialist country.
Yes.
One of the very first leaders, if not the first leader that recognized Israel, was Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union, because he thought Israel was going to join the Soviet bloc.
Really?
Yes, and because who controlled Israel in the early days of the state? The socialists and the communists. But what happened over the decades was more and more people came in from Islamic countries and from the former Eastern European countries that were in the concentration camps. And then Jews came from so many different countries, and the balance shifted to the right wing. And so today, I think it's fair to say that 65% of the public in Israel is either religious or nationalist. 35%, which is about 20% Arabic speaking, and 15% socialists. All that you have left of this tremendous socialist history is 15%.
Wow.
And what happened in the formation of this coalition was that Naftali Bennett and these other breakaways from the Likud joined the socialists and this Arab party, Ram, and they have the majority. I don't know how long it'll last. Some people say a year, some people say less, some people say more. All I know is it gives me time to get my party on the map. And so one of the things I wanted to share, this book is going to come out in Hebrew for all of you people who love to read in Hebrew. I know you don't read Hebrew, but this is going to get me onto radio, TV, and newspapers, which has not really happened very much yet. And then we're going to break out of our very small numbers into the thousands and tens of thousands, if not more.
So, what does the Bible Bloc Party stand for?
The values of Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy, getting Christians represented in our Knesset, and preparing for the major homecoming of 10 million Jews and Christians who I believe will be fleeing from the U.S., from the West, to Israel. I also think that ISIS is down, but it's not out. I think ISIS eventually is going to defeat the Shiites. I do believe there's going to be an Armageddon. And so therefore, the homecoming of the Jews fits in with the new borders of Israel, which will be to the Euphrates River.
Wow. Listen, that takes us to another segment of the conversation. Mondo and I are both Bible teachers, and we're both interested in Bible prophecy. And right at the heart of Bible prophecy, Mondo, is Israel. And I know you're curious as to Avi's last statement. And what would you want him to talk about at this point?
You know, if you can, give us an update on some of the players. You mentioned ISIS. You know, we have Turkey, we have Syria in there. Putin's getting impatient with some of Israel's, renegade bombings. Kind of give us an update on how you see the players coming to be.
The Russians have been playing a very important role in this game, negatively and positively. I think it is fair and accurate to say that Netanyahu, our former prime minister, had an excellent relationship with Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia. And it's also very important to stress that Vladimir Putin sincerely has a love for the Jewish people. He is the exact opposite of an anti-Semite. He grew up in Russia, living with Jewish friends in school. The mothers of these Jewish kids doted on him and fed him Jewish meals, and he was like home with the Jews. He has this really strong love for Jewish people. I think Putin also understands that out of our population of 7.5 million Jews and Christians, that at least 2 million speak Russian. They came home from Russia, Ukraine, other former republics of the Soviet Union. And so there are some people who even think that Israel is kind of like a mini Russia or a mini Soviet Union. Because culturally, we have so much in common with Russia, with the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, with Ukraine, all these Eastern European countries. We are not foreign to the Russian people. I've even heard, many Jews go to Moscow and they are embraced in the streets and say, "Oh, you're from Israel, and we are Russian Christians, and we love Israel." Now, also another thing, we know that I'm going to say some really heavy stuff now. I don't mean to be too cynical, but every country has a military-industrial complex.
Yes.
Russia supplies about 10% of the Middle Eastern weapons. The U.S. sells about 90%. So I would not say, why is Putin selling arms to Iran and why is he selling nuclear capabilities to Iran? Everybody's selling everything to the Islamic world because the governments of the West and the government of Russia, and pretty soon China also, depend on income from the weapons industries. Now, the Russians have a very, very interesting history with the Sunni Muslims, the Turks. The Russians have been fighting the Turks for 1,000 years. This is something that is not taught in American schools, 1,000 years. The Russians also fought the Iranian Shiites, but it was very short. And to make a long story short, the Iranian Shiites are now allies of Putin and Russia. The Shiites are dominating Syria today, and you heard about the civil war, where actually 80% of Syria was Sunni. I would say more aligned with the Turks, who are Sunni. The coalition of Bashar al-Assad was 10% Christian, 10% Druze. Druze are an ethnic group in Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel. That's 20%. So you have Christians, you have Druze, you have Shiites, you have Kurds of the northeast. 25% are not Sunnis. And of the Sunni population, 25% of Syria was allied with the Bashar al-Assad regime and the Ba'ath Party from the very beginnings. So it's the perfect storm because 50% of Syria is pure Sunni, fanatic Sunni, aligned with ISIS. And the other 50% is a coalition of all the minorities plus 25% which are Sunni.
Wow. Now, I want to stop you right there because this is a, if you will, a massive conflict, and I think easy to understand, and I want you to continue. You have us in a point of great suspense here. In other words, you're pointing out that there is a kind of a tripwire effect here, or that there is a conflict that could go the wrong way in a hurry.
Correct.
So continue with what you think might happen in the near future.
I'll divide that up into two. In other words, the world that we see right now clearly in front of our eyes, and then there's something, I think, behind it all, which I was referring to about Turkey and Armageddon, which is going to be my 8th book, God willing. But I'll talk first about what we see happening right now. Firstly, I want to complete the story about Syria. Syria is now pretty much controlled, at least the center of Syria is controlled by the Ba'ath Party and the Bashar al-Assad group. Out of the 20 million population, 500,000 were killed, mostly Sunnis. A few million, I don't know how many, were forced to flee the country into refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan and other countries and in Europe. A lot of these people went to Turkey. Turkey received them, and then Turkey allowed them or encouraged them to go across the Aegean Sea to the Greek islands, and then from there into Europe. There are many Syrians, Sunnis mostly, in Europe and even in the United States of America. So this is not a democratic process. This is a process of murder, which is very inherent in the Islamic system, in which Sunnis and Shiites they hate each other more than they hate the Jews. Lebanon. Lebanon is basically an appendix of Syria. Lebanon is divided into 4. You've got the Christians up in primarily north of Beirut. You've got the Druze, who as I said before, they're descended from Jethro. They're kind of our cousins. You've got the Sunnis, and you've got the Shiites. 40% of Lebanon are Shiite Muslims, mostly Hezbollah. They are backed by Iran. The Shiites in Syria backed by Iran. And the idea is to create an encircling of the state of Israel. It's called the Shiite Crescent, kind of like around Israel. The Turks are Sunni and they hate the Shiites. And actually 31% of Turkey is Shiite, but they are suppressed by the Sunni Turks. 25% of Turkey is Sunni, but they're Kurds, and the Turks hate them. So we have a powder keg in the whole area, which could go in any direction. Something very interesting from the news in Jordan, very interesting point, that the Jordanians had arrested an ISIS terror group from the south of Jordan, and their plan was to kill a Jordanian army patrol, because these terrorists are armed. They would ambush and kill Jordanian soldiers, take the vehicles, take their weapons, take the uniforms, go down to the Jordan River, and then attack Israeli soldiers and make it look like it was the Jordanians that did it. But it wasn't the Jordanians, it was ISIS. We have a lot of ISIS in Jordan. And one of the things I'm saying, and I don't like to criticize any American president, but there are presidents who say that ISIS is finished. No, ISIS is not finished. It's down. But my fear is, don't forget, 70% of Jordan is Palestinian. Many of the Palestinians and the Bedouin, the other 30%, are ISIS. And I am very fearful and kind of expectant of an ISIS revolution eventually in Jordan, which means you'll have the black flags of ISIS all along the Jordan River. And, you guys in Oklahoma or Texas or anywhere here in the Midwest, you know what your Midwest streams look like. The Jordan River is smaller than one of your typical streams in Oklahoma or Texas. When you have those black flags up along the Jordan River, they're going to be digging tunnels under those rivers, and they will be preparing for an invasion of Israel with millions of Muslim volunteers.
Well, you mentioned the powder keg, which is obvious. How does Naftali Bennett what's his approach, which may be different in philosophy from Netanyahu's? Does he just continue the same policy?
Same policy. And I'll say something else also. The good news and the bad news is that the generals in the Israeli army are all socialists. It doesn't matter who the prime minister is. The socialist leadership in the civil service controls the army, the police, the foreign ministry. If you are right-wing like me, you will never be promoted in the army. And one of the criticisms of Netanyahu was always that Netanyahu has no generals. It's very true, because the generals are all from the socialist camp. So the socialist mentality, the socialist policy of ideology of defense is always the same. Doesn't matter who the prime minister is. And whoever the prime minister is, he sits down with these generals and they explain to him, they're very professional generals, explain to him exactly what's happening. They explain exactly what our intelligence knows and where our intelligence is, and all this is bona fide. So bona fide means that the ultimate decisions militarily, doesn't matter if it's Netanyahu or Naftali Bennett.
Well, in one sense, you're touring America, coming around. Why would Christians even need to be concerned with Israel today? I mean, honestly, that's a fair question. Historically, we certainly in the Bible we see it, but in a modern sense, why is Israel important for the average Christian?
I would say two reasons. From the Jewish perspective, we had a Holocaust in World War II, and one of our big beefs, excuse the expression, is that we were complaining the Christians didn't help us, the Christians weren't with us. And today we have, especially the evangelical Christians who love Israel very much and love the Jews very much. And I am seeing an Armageddon war, not too far away, with the Turks primarily, but it's going to be with the Sunni Muslims. Before that, we're going to probably see something happening with Iran. I am praying to God that Iran will have an internal change, like a revolution or something. Iranians are great people. I love them. They love Israel. They love us. So from the Israeli perspective, we need steadfast Christian support so that we can be strong. From the Christian perspective, the Messiah is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. The Messiah is coming or returning to Jerusalem for all of us. We'll check his hands. You remember, I think it's in the book of John, in the Gospel of John, the disciples don't recognize Jesus, and he says, "Look at my hands."
Thomas.
So we'll look at the hands, we'll look at the feet. My job, meanwhile, is to defend Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy. But Israel belongs also to the Christians. We have the same God, we have the same Torah, the same Bible. Messiah is a Jew. He's not a Muslim. He's not a Buddhist. He's not a Hindu, or whatever. He's not from Mars. He's one of the Jewish people. The preachings that Jesus preaches are Jewish preachings, and so we share so much in common. It's your Israel also.
Well, we think of the Bible verse, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem," and I'm sure you know what comes after that. "They shall prosper that love thee." And we do love Israel.
And that's one of the reasons why America has always been world power number one, and I pray to God that it stays like that. Because America loves Israel. Christian America loves Israel.
It is so much, we are so intertwined, in particular, where Bible prophecy is concerned. And I think that's why so many Americans go to Israel. They want to see the land that will actually be the spot where these things will happen, and we believe in a very short time.
I wanted to add also that you have had my son Aaron on your shows, and there have been now, in the last few years, we have been discovering things that prove the veracity of the Bible in the archaeology of Israel.
Yes.
And I know that you offer Aaron's books and teachings also. So we have a double front here. We have the so-called atheists who don't really believe in God, and the teachings of my son convince those who do not believe to believe. And that's very, very important, to prove the veracity of the Bible.
From what you have told us, my belief in Bible prophecy is strengthened. In other words, you keep talking about an Armageddon. And I think American Christians are looking with some trepidation at the future. And yet, our faith is in the Lord, and we know who's going to come out victorious. And we just praise the Lord, and we bless the nation Israel, and we would like to bless you and yours. And
Amen.
May your work continue. May you finish this book in Hebrew, and may you have great success in Israeli politics. Avi.
Amen. God's willing.
Avi Lipkin. And Mondo, it's been good having you here with me.
Great to be back.
I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are.